The fall-off of The Promised Neverland is often seen as one of the most disappointing declines in anime. It went from being considered a potential masterpiece to an example of how quickly a series can lose its quality. In just 11 episodes. The story is set in 2045 at Grace Fieldhouse, an orphanage where 38 children live happily under the care of their mom, Isabella. Everything seems perfect at first. The kids wear white uniforms, have identification numbers tattooed on their necks, and live peaceful lives. But that illusion is shattered when the main characters, Emma, Norman, and Ray, discover the truth. The orphanage is actually a farm. The children aren't being adopted, they're being raised as food for demons. Season 1 turns into a tense psychological thriller, focusing on the battle of wits between the children and Isabella as they plan their escape. It stood out because it didn't rely on typical shonen action. Instead, it focused on strategy, tension, and mind games, similar to Death Note. Because of this, it became a global hit. Season 1 was widely praised, holding an 8.4+ rating on MyAnimeList for years, and the manga had over 42 million copies in circulation. The anime's success also made it a major title for Cloverworks. However, while Season 1 was praised for its pacing and storytelling, Season 2 was heavily criticized. The main issue was that it tried to rush through the rest of the manga instead of adapting it properly. Season 1 covered 37 chapters in 12 episodes, but Season 2 attempted to cover the remaining 144 chapters in just 11 episodes. As a result, major parts of the story were cut. The Goldie Pond arc, considered by many fans to be the best part of the manga, was completely removed. Important characters like Yugo, who played a key mentor role, were also left out. On top of that, the final episode ended with a slideshow of still images, quickly showing major events and character endings that should have taken multiple seasons to develop. There's no official explanation for why this happened, but there are a few likely reasons. The production committee may have wanted to finish the anime quickly to promote the already completed manga instead of committing to a longer adaptation. Also, the manga author was involved in Season 2's direction, which suggests they may have tried to fix pacing issues from the manga, but ended up cutting too much and weakening the story overall. The Fall of Tokyo Revengers is a good example of how a series can go from being extremely popular to slowly fading out of attention. At its peak, it wasn't just a hit, it was everywhere, even competing with big names like One Piece and Jujutsu Kaisen in terms of sales and hype. The story follows Takemichi Hanagaki, a 26-year-old stuck in a miserable life. He finds out that his middle school girlfriend Hinata Tachibana was killed by the Tokyo Manji gang. After a near-death experience, he gains the ability to travel exactly 12 years into the past. He uses this power to join the gang, rise through its ranks, and try to change the future so he can save her. The series blends time travel with gang drama, focusing on loyalty, brotherhood, and how small actions can completely change outcomes. In 2021, Tokyo Revengers was unavoidable. It became more than just an anime, it influenced fashion and trends. The manga sold millions of copies in a short time, largely thanks to the success of the first season. Characters like Mikey and Draken quickly became iconic, with Mikey especially representing the strong but emotionally broken leader type. The series even won the 44th Kodansha Manga Award for Shonen, and each major arc sparked huge online discussions. Its decline didn't happen because of just one problem, but a combination of issues. One major factor was the change in streaming platforms. Season 1 was available on Crunchyroll, which made it easy for most anime fans to watch. Later seasons moved to Disney Plus and Hulu in the US, where the show received very little promotion. This reduced its visibility and weakened the weekly discussions that helped keep the hype alive. There were also production issues. While Season 1 wasn't visually outstanding, it was solid enough. But as the story got bigger, the animation quality didn't improve to match it. Later seasons relied more on still shots and less dynamic fight scenes, which made the action feel underwhelming. Another issue was Takemichi himself. In the beginning, his emotional and determined personality made him stand out. He wasn't strong, but he kept going. Over time, though, many viewers became frustrated with how often he cried and struggled without showing much growth in combat or confidence. Compared to more proactive main characters like Denji from Chainsaw Man or Itadori from Jujutsu Kaisen, he started to feel less engaging. Finally, the manga's ending hurt the series a lot. It wrapped up in 2022, but many fans felt the final arc was rushed and poorly handled. There were plot inconsistencies, sudden power developments, and an ending that made earlier events feel less meaningful. As a result, even anime-only fans lost lost interest after hearing negative reactions about how the story ends. It's rare to see an anime go from being seen as the king of isekai to a clear example of how to lose an audience as quickly as the rising of the shield hero. What started as a dark, satisfying story about overcoming betrayal slowly turned into something repetitive, safe, and for many viewers, boring. At its core, the series is a typical isekai setup. Naofumi Iwatani is summoned to another world as one of 4 legendary heroes. While the others receive weapons like a sword, spear, and bow, he's given a shield, which everyone looks down on. Almost immediately, he's betrayed, falsely accused of a serious crime, and left with nothing. Instead of being a power fantasy, the story begins as a survival tale. Naofumi becomes bitter and distrustful, forced to rely on other outcasts as he fights against waves of monsters in a world that's against him. Season 1 was a huge success worldwide. It dominated streaming platforms like Crunchyroll and sparked a lot of discussion online, making it one of the most talked about anime of 2019. One of the biggest highlights was when Naofumi finally cleared his name and those who wronged him faced consequences. It was a very satisfying payoff for viewers. However, things took a sharp turn in Season 2. A big reason for the drop in quality was the Spirit Tortoise arc. Even in the original light novels, this part of the story wasn't very popular, and the anime made it worse. The pacing slowed down significantly, and the heavy use of weak CGI, especially for the tortoise itself, made it hard to take seriously. Instead of feeling like a high-stakes adventure, the story dragged on with little excitement. Another issue was Naofumi's character. Early on, his me against the world mindset made him interesting and different. But once he was proven innocent, the story struggled to give him a strong personal conflict. He became more like a standard, slightly grumpy hero rather than the complex, morally gray character people liked. The world also started to feel less dangerous. The other heroes turned into comic relief, and the villains became very one-dimensional. Season 3 tried to fix some of these problems by improving the animation and bringing back a more grounded, intense tone. But by then, much of the audience had already lost interest. Many viewers had moved on to newer and more engaging isekai series like Mushoku Tensei. The 7 Deadly Sins is a clear example of how a top-tier anime can fall off quickly due to poor production decisions. What once felt like it could join the new Big 3 conversation eventually became known more for its decline than its success. The story is set in a fantasy world inspired by Arthurian legend. It follows Elizabeth Leoness, a princess searching for the 7 Deadly Sins, a group of powerful knights who were framed for trying to overthrow the kingdom. Led by Meliodas, the group comes back together to defeat the corrupt holy knights and restore order. The series mixes fantasy adventure with intense battles, a structured power system, and deeper mysteries about its main characters. At its peak, the series was extremely successful. The manga regularly competed with One Piece in sales, and the anime became one of Netflix's early original hits, introducing a lot of people to anime. The first 2 seasons, handled by A1 Pictures, had strong animation, bright visuals, and memorable fight scenes that helped define shonen anime at the time. The decline, however, was sudden and obvious. After the movie didn't perform well, the production situation changed. A1 Pictures stepped away, and the project was given to Studio Dean under a very tight schedule. Since Dean was already busy, much of the work was outsourced, which led to a noticeable drop in quality. Season 3 is where things really went wrong. The animation became inconsistent, with stiff movement, off-model characters, and weak fight scenes. The most anticipated battle, Meliodas vs. Escanor, ended up being underwhelming and was widely criticized online. Instead of being a highlight, it became something fans joked about. Another issue was censorship. The show started using white blood instead of red during violent scenes, which many viewers found distracting and unrealistic. It took away from the darker tone the series originally had and made serious moments feel less impactful. The story itself also began to struggle. The introduction of strict power levels made fights feel less interesting, and the rapid increase in scale made earlier character moments feel less important. On top of that, the relationship between Meliodas and Elizabeth became overly complicated and harder to follow. While the sequel, 4 Knights of the Apocalypse, has tried to improve things with better animation, the damage to the original series' reputation is still widely remembered. Tokyo Ghoul started as a major cultural phenomenon, helping define the edgy anime aesthetic of the mid-2000s, but eventually fell apart due to poor handling. The story is set in modern-day Tokyo and follows Ken Kaneki, a quiet college student who survives a date with a woman who is secretly a ghoul, a being that lives by eating human flesh. After a freak accident kills her and leaves Kaneki critically injured, her organs are transplanted into him to save his life. This turns him into a one-eyed ghoul, a hybrid caught between the human world and the ghoul world. At its core, the series explores deep themes like identity, the cycle of violence, and the blurred line between good and evil. Before its decline, Tokyo Ghoul was a powerhouse in the anime industry. Its success came from a strong first impression, with Season 1 becoming an instant classic. It managed to appeal to both casual viewers and hardcore anime fans, much like Attack on Titan. The opening song Unravel by TK from Ling Tosite Sigure became one of the most iconic anime openings ever. Meanwhile, Sui Ishida's original manga gained worldwide recognition for its psychological depth and detailed artwork, consistently ranking as a bestseller. Kaneki's white hair and signature zipper mask became instantly recognizable symbols in cosplay and online culture. The downfall of Tokyo Ghoul wasn't gradual, it was caused by a series of major creative missteps. Instead of adapting the manga's strong second half, the second season, Tokyo Ghoul Square A, took an original direction. Although Sui Ishida provided a draft for this version, the studio Pierrot reportedly didn't fully follow it. This resulted in a confusing and unfocused storyline that lacked the emotional depth of the original material. Things only got worse with Tokyo Ghoul Re. The pacing became extremely rushed, with the final season trying to fit around 120 chapters of dense content into just 12 episodes. As a result, important character arcs were cut, major fights were reduced to minimal animation, and viewers who hadn't read the manga struggled to understand what was happening or who the characters were. The high-quality animation from Season 1 was replaced with stiff movement and weaker visuals, and what should have been an intense, large-scale war for Tokyo ended up feeling small and underwhelming. In the end, the anime lost what made the story special. The manga is a slow, character-driven narrative filled with internal struggles and philosophical depth, but the anime rushed through these elements, turning a complex and emotional story into a generic action series. It's rare for an anime to dominate global attention the way Sword Art Online did in 2012, only to become one of the most criticized series a few years later. It went from being seen as a masterpiece to something many people now treat as a guilty pleasure. At its core, SAO helped define the modern isekai boom. The story is set in 2022, where thousands of players log into a full-dive virtual reality game called Sword Art Online. They soon realize they're trapped, logging out is impossible, and dying in the game means dying in real life. The only way to escape is to clear all 100 floors of Aincrad. The story follows Kirito, a solo player trying to survive, who eventually forms a close bond with a skilled fighter named Asuna. Before the backlash, the series was hugely influential. It didn't create the trapped in a game concept, but it made it massively popular, leading to a wave of similar anime. Alongside Attack on Titan, it helped push anime further into Western mainstream platforms like Crunchyroll and Netflix. At the time, Kirito and his signature swords were everywhere in anime communities. The decline didn't happen all at once. It came from a series of decisions that gradually pushed fans away. One of the biggest turning points came halfway through Season 1. After the Aincrad arc ended, the story moved to a new game, Alfheim Online. This shift removed the original high-stakes tension of death in the game equals death in real life. At the same time, Asuna, who had been a strong and independent character, was reduced to someone needing rescue, which disappointed many viewers. The arc also introduced an uncomfortable subplot involving Kirito's cousin, which added to the criticism. Kirito's character also became a major point of debate. He was often seen as too perfect, rarely struggling, gaining unique abilities like dual wielding without much challenge, and attracting multiple female characters with little effort. This made it harder for some viewers to stay invested, since the sense of danger and growth felt limited. On top of that, the series struggled with consistency. It would switch between serious, high-stakes moments and light slice-of-life scenes, which sometimes felt disconnected. It also relied too often on disturbing scenes to make villains seem threatening, which many people felt was unnecessary and overused.